Good evening, everyone, or whatever time of day you're on. Tonight, I will be streaming Castlevania Bloodlines, so welcome to stream Cyan, Daibuman, Mega Man, Jaden, Ruslan, Snivy, YouTube, and Pixel Boy, and Mr. Lee, and anyone else I missed. Alrighty then, let me just bring up Twitch chat, in case there's spam there, because I know someone's gonna try doing that. Odd view. Pause. Hi, Lurks. Nice to see you here too. Alright, everything should be set. So without further ado, let us begin. Greetings, everyone. My name is Atterville, and I welcome you all to my Let's Replay of Castlevania Bloodlines, a gem of an entry into this franchise released for the Sega Genesis in 1994. I'm playing through this game again, both to celebrate Daibuman's birthday and to fulfill a promise I made over 7 years ago. That being to complete the game again on expert difficulty using Eric Lecard. If you didn't watch my original Let's Play, which I don't blame you if you didn't, it's poor quality, I'll explain almost everything again. This game is also special to me. This game is also special to me, as this was the first game I fully completed on my channel. This wasn't my first LP, that'd be Paladin's Quest, but that never was completed. So here's Eric, he wields the Lecard spear. Compared to John Morris, he moves a bit faster, and his spear has longer range. The trade-off is that it deals a bit less damage, which only really becomes important when you get to the bosses. For most of the game, however, it's not so much of an issue. The spear also grants Eric a few nifty abilities, one of which I will showcase very soon. First, grab this book. By holding down and then pressing the jump button, Eric can propel himself upwards. By doing that, I skip stage 1-2 entirely. John is forced to go down there. So our first boss is... I don't know what to call this, a Cerebus? A giant fire dog? Here's another nifty feature of the... Here's another nifty feature of the jump. It makes you temporarily immune to all attacks. It makes you immune to all sorts of attack. It makes you immune to all attacks during the duration of the jump. I abused this a lot during this playthrough. Hellhound, got it. Comparing normal with expert mode, there aren't that many differences. Outside of there being a few more enemies and fewer healing items. Both characters can upgrade their weaponry up to level 4. However, if you take a hit while you have a level 4 weapon on you, it'll be downgraded to level 3. In order for that upgrade to fall, I believe you have to destroy 30 candles first. Eric's enhanced range is really helpful when you attack enemies from afar. Not to mention that Eric can attack directly upwards, whereas John can't. Don't worry about spoiling the game. I played through this at least several dozen times. This is technically my 46th attempt at the game. And here's our first true boss battle, Armor Battler. John has a slightly easier time against this one, but otherwise, pretty straightforward. Just keep your distance and get ready to dodge. Sub-weapons also make minced meat out of him. And that was the ruins of Dracula's castle. A pretty solid start, and a nice tribute to the preceding games in the series. One of the reasons why this game is unique compared to pretty much all of its predecessors, the majority of the game does not take place at or around Dracula's castle. Essentially, our two hunters travel across Europe in order to stop the plans of Elizabeth, in order to stop Battery's plans. I just wanted to point out how beautiful this reflective water effect is. I know Rocket Knight Adventures did something similar for the lava stage. A combination of a vampire killer's two greatest weaknesses in this franchise, stairs and water. It's not just that Eric can't swim, he has super drowning skills. For some odd reason, he cannot hold his breath. If for whatever reason, either Morris or Lacard fall into the water and get completely submerged, they'll quickly take damage. Here comes one of the easiest mini-bosses in the game, the Water Mage. His only means of attacking you is by raising the water level. He can kill you, but that's only if you do nothing. Speaking of laughably easy mini-bosses, just go in front of the armor, and duck. It'll never be able to hit you that way. Meanwhile, this axe armor can actually hit you, but yet again, pretty easy to juke it. As I said, As I said earlier, I'll be making heavy use of the spear jump. The introduction of the Medusa heads. I also want to point out how they splash out of the water. I know nowadays that's a pretty straightforward effect, but back then it was pretty noticeable. So, as I was saying earlier, Morris and the card are basically on a road trip through Europe, trying to stop Battery's plans and stop her recruitment of monsters. Unfortunately, Elizabeth has quite a head start. We're at the sunken shrine of Atlantis, while she's probably at her castle. I will, YouTube. In terms of difficulty, the first two stages aren't really that difficult, especially if you play as Eric. Even if you play as Morris, as long as you're cautious, it isn't too bad. This is far easier than Castlevania 1 and 3. Precisely, Daibuman. In this universe, Elizabeth orchestrated the start of World War I in order to revive Dracula. Even in real life, Battery was a serial killer. Time for a second boss, the Rock Golem. If you simply want to cheese this boss, keep spamming the special sub-weapon. However, I decided to play fair. For the first part of this battle, you need to chip away at the columns, so you can hit his head. But as you chip down the golem, it'll start dropping more and more rocks from the ceiling. Which is why, if you use the axe or the special sub-weapon and you keep hitting the head, it'll never be able to do those attacks. Next up, traveling from Greece over to Italy, where we visit the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and where the game gets somewhat challenging, and where we encounter somewhat of a difficulty spike. The first time I played this game, I didn't know what those bird-type enemies were. They're harpies. To get past this section, just keep jumping. You'll be able to dodge most of the bone pillars. Upcoming is the first route split. If you're playing as Morris, you have to use your whip swinging abilities to go to the right. If you're playing as the card, you have to spear jump upwards. This is something I wish this game did more, having separate routes for each of the characters. Indeed, Sylveon. This is where the game really begins. Well, that mini-boss was a whole lot of something. One of the things I credit this game for is leveraging the technical capabilities of the Genesis. One of the things I credit the game for doing is leveraging the technical capabilities of the Sega Genesis. For instance, the rotating tower. Meat-Eater Dibuman. In fact, out of all the stages in the game, this is my least favorite one. Mostly due to the boss battle. I talked about the card and his abilities, as well as the spear. Now let me talk about the sub-weapons. Here, both characters have access to the axe, the holy water, and the boomerang. The axe works about the same way as it did in the classic games, although here it got a damage buff. Holy water the same, but it too got a damage buff, but it too received a damage buff. The boomerang works similarly to the cross, but not exactly. In general, it feels like a nerfed version of the cross. Then again, the cross kinda needed a nerf anyways. In addition to the base sub-weapons, you can actually use powered-up versions of them by holding up and the item use button. For the axe, if I use the powered-up version of the axe, I throw 3 mini-axes forwards. For the holy water, it's a rotating fireball. 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 Unlike most other Castlevania games, I don't particularly like the boomerang. This boss, the Gargoyle. Least favorite boss in the game, and I don't blame you for getting motion sickness by watching this. It's not so much the boss's moves themselves, it's more or less the rotating tower at the bottom. Once again, Eric has the easier time here. I know Morris deals more damage against everything, but for the Gargoyle, there is a strict damage limit per phase. Essentially, your best option is to stay around the center. And to correct an earlier statement, Morris can attack upwards, just not directly upwards. Also, Moving on to the German munitions factory. Whereas the previous 3 locations were more ancient ruins, now we have something much more modern. To add on to my earlier statement, Lakara can actually attack diagonally at ground level too, but he can't do it while jumping, which does cause some problems in this and a future level, but as long as you but not too many. Here's something many people overlook. There's an alcove right over here, which you can only there's an alcove over here with 4 candles. Going back to the story, this was actually Konami's attempt at canonizing Bram Stoker's Dracula. John Morris's father is Quincy Morris. Unfortunately, he was murdered. It's not exactly the same Dracula. It's not exactly the same Dracula from Bram Stoker. It's slightly different, as the events don't exactly line up. Oh, I love to mess around in this section, especially between these 2 pistons. As you can see, it kind of messes up the collision detection. I also love this section, especially as Eric. I don't care about damage boosting through this. Whereas with Morris, you have to go through this the normal way. You can spear jump throughout this. Nice to see the rotating gears outside of a clock tower stage too. It was getting a bit too expected. This section. I died a half-dozen times here. Mainly due to these enemies. This is one of those locations where instead I wish I was playing as Morris. I wanted to have the ability of attacking. Having the ability to attack diagonally while jumping, really handy. Randomly, Dr. Frankenstein's monster. If there's one critique I have of this game, it's about the difficulty of mini-bosses. If there's one critique I have about this game, it's the mini-boss difficulty. Same to a lesser extent with some of the bosses. Hopefully those enemies come back in a future title. Probably Portrait of Ruin, seeing how it's this game's sequel. Oh yeah. When breaking candles, instead of collecting the usual hearts, we instead acquire crystals. I suppose Battery is using a different system of trapping souls. Ah, this boss, the Gear Steamer. Looks like it came directly out of Vector Man. Whereas all the preceding bosses felt like they came from a more mystical setting, came from a more mystical or horror themed setting, this one looks the most out of place. Both in terms of its visuals and audio. This is where playing as Morris would also be really handy. Long story short, the whip swing deals 16 damage, whereas the green spear only deals 8 damage. This doesn't really cause an issue with most regular stage enemies, but for bosses, this means that Morris can usually tear through bosses much more rapidly. And sub-weapons don't really help. And sub-weapons don't help as much, as all bosses, with the exception of the Armor Battler and Elizabeth's second form, receive half damage from them. Now we're in France, at the Palace of Versailles. If you get hit by the pollen, it reverses your controls temporarily. Here come our friends, the red skeletons, aka the ones that can never be aka the ones that can never be destroyed. This enemy. It's always annoying to fight with your primary weapon. That's why I always resort to using the sub-weapons instead. Just keep your distance and time your swings. More fun with the spear jump. Not only does it allow you to dodge attacks, it actually damages enemies. That's another interesting aspect of the Castlevania franchise. The further we go into the timeline, the greater variety of monsters Dracula has in his army. Exactly, Diableman. Only a few games take place in the medieval era. Another rot split. Morris goes to the right, Eric goes up. We already have a few games taking place pre-medieval. Some post-medieval, some modern era, and even some futuristic. And yes, Eric decapitated that harpy. That's another thing this game That's another thing this game does to distinguish itself from the pack, being bloodier and gorier. That's also because, of course, that's also because of Sega's laxer standards during the time. YouTube, there's no problems. More laughably easy mini-bosses. I know these archers will return in future titles. It's not so much of a problem with the bosses, but for the mini-bosses, yeah, my main complaint of the game. One of my main complaints with the game. The only occurrences of those two enemies in the game. Not sure why they weren't reused later. I call this a spirit column. What I should have been doing earlier is actually going to the pillar and attacking directly. Or just use the axe. Speaking of sub-weapon damage, the axe deals somewhere between 1 to 10 points of... The axe deals somewhere between 1 to 10. Oh, I didn't... never mind. Don't have the full values. Just so you know, the axe deals 10 damage, usually. Axe crash 1 to 8. Our next boss is called the Princess of Moss. Next up is the Princess of Moss. Even when she reveals her true form, she isn't too tough. Now, if you're playing as Morris, it is a bit trickier. You don't want to accidentally jump into her. With Eric, just hold up and attack. With Eric, just hold up and stab. We're coming up to the final stage of the game. Proserpina Castle. Best music coming. Best game music coming. The first game of this castle, the visual distortion, the visual warping here. Essentially, it's broken up into 3 sections: bottom, middle, and top. Just keep an eye on each section, and you should be fine. During test runs, I actually fell down into the pits 3 times. Agreed, Snivy. The boss difficulty is also something I have some qualms about. Second main gimmick of this... Next main mechanic? Reverse gravity. This is the hardest section of the castle for me. After this is smooth sailing. It wouldn't be so bad if I had mid-air control. We had that already, Sylveon. Here to come. They die in one hit to everything. And they do change direction. Sorry there. You ran out of time. So this dead encounter is different from usual. First, he wants to play a card game with us, which is essentially a boss rush. Don't worry, all these bosses take double damage from everything. And you only need to refight the Golem, the Gear Steamer, and the Gargoyle. So finish one battle, get teleported back here, choose the next one. The other three cards are actually attacks that can do. If you're playing on normal mode, there are only two of those cards. If you're playing on normal mode, one of those three cards will instead be food. Compared to everything else in the game, Gear Steamer feels kind of out of place. Oh, don't get me wrong, I quite enjoyed their battle. But graphically and visually, they feel almost directly out of Vector Man. So here's Death's attack. Also laughably easy to dodge. I mean, if you keep holding right or left, 1 or 2 seconds before he does the attack, you'll easily dodge it. Eventually, I will Let's Play Vector Man on the channel. It's a game I technically have in my collection, but never completed. That'd be Magic Man YouTube. Again, I don't really hate the Gargoyle boss itself, it's more the spinning tower. Also, you may have also noticed that I haven't been using the green snake as much. For 2 reasons. One is that it lags the game. 2, it's not really that powerful. It only deals 8 damage. Ah, poor Dad. Compared to Castlevania 1 and 3, where it was quite frightening, this was a joke. That's why I pick up the axe instead. So here's Battery herself. In her first phase, she turns into Medusa, who, following the trend, is a joke. One of the easiest Medusa encounters yet. It seems the further we go down the timeline, the easier she becomes. Now that that form's out of the way, we have to go through this monotonous phase. She'll always teleport to the side of the screen you're farthest away from. If you're not fast enough with your strikes, she'll fire some fireballs at you. And if you let those orbs coalesce at the center, she'll release an elemental attack at you. She'll throw an elemental attack at you. It could be both. That is an iconic part of the series. She only takes damage as her orbs are destroyed. So it doesn't really matter if you're playing as Morris or Lacard. It takes about the same amount of time. With practice, Cyan. This is actually my 46th attempt. Of the entire playthrough, I mean. Goodbye, Battery. And she never makes a comeback in a future game that I know of. Shame, Jaden. Sadly, our duo is too late. Dracula has been revived. Time to slay him yet again. For this first phase, his weak point is his head. Keep a safe distance away from him so you know which one of 3 attacks he'll do. You can either use Hellfire, those aimed fireballs, or that rotating fire line. Or if you're playing as a card, Spear Jump. I never really used this Spear Twirl attack. It only deals 3 damage, so not really useful unless against weaker enemies. For the second phase, he summons in Bartley's right hand, Drolta. Whenever I first played this game, I always wondered whoever this character was. Unless you read the manual, you'll never know who this one is. Third and final phase, where he turns into this gargoyle thing, where his waist is a mount. When he turns red, he starts firing a flamethrower at you. But you can trap him against the side of the sea. But you can trap him at the side. For his last phase, he turns white, and every time you hit him, he releases a stream of bones. And lags the game. Clean finish. If I haven't made it apparent already, I love the spear jump. And that marks the end of Castlevania Bloodlines. It is Snivy. This game doesn't actually take that long, as long as you don't keep failing. Thus, Eric has fulfilled his destiny as a vampire hunter. Now, he must venture forth into greater unknowns. He should have kept the spear with him. You get this extra part of the ending if you play on expert mode. So, here are my overall thoughts on Castlevania Bloodlines. To sum it up, this is a hidden gem in this series. To summarize, this is a hidden gem in this franchise. One I really wish more people knew and or played it. I really wish more people played this game, as well as its distant cousin. Not only does it provide a satisfying Castlevania experience, it also pretty well utilizes the Genesis hardware. Oh sure, it does have its fair share of lag spikes, but they usually aren't too bad. Sadly, this also meant I skipped the greens. This was the main reason why I skipped the green snake special sub-weapon. Too much lag. Really, my main gripe about the game is the difficulty balancing, specifically of the mini-bosses and bosses. In short, too many of them, especially in the second half of the game, are simply jokes, or laughably easy. And the penultimate boss against Battery herself was disappointing. Medusa was fine, albeit easy, but herself in a regular form, monotonous. In any case, I highly recommend you try out this game. This title is included in both the Castlevania Anniversary Collection for the PS4, Xbox One, and Steam, and Nintendo Switch, as well as the Sega Genesis Mini. game, I didn't use a vampire killer, I used the card spear. Well then, I hope you all enjoyed my Let's Play of this game. If you enjoyed it, please rate, comment, favorite, and or subscribe, as they all help out the channel. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter as well, and join my Discord server, as I regularly post updates there. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all in a future Let's Play. And thank you, Daiboom. Happy birthday again to Daiboomin, and thank you for suggesting for me to play this game. This was a blast.